All right, we got to stand up. We have to stand up and welcome Donna the official way because she's too amazing for us to be sitting down and kind of passively doing this. Let's give her a real super longevity conference welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Donna Gates.
Okay, thank you. I'm so glad I'm back because there's so much more I wanted to say. Yesterday when I sat down to do book signing, everybody came up and asked me the most amazing questions, and I wish you would ask them again because they were great questions that would allow me to say a lot more. I love questions as they let you fill in the blank that we forget to say. But today I'm supposed to be talking about brain health, and there's supposed to be a PowerPoint. Is there a PowerPoint for me? Otherwise, I won't do it. I can wing it. Oh, there it is. Okay. Okay, I'll put this down. Okay, so this one's on the brain, and this is the wrong slide. This is like way into it. Can we go back to the first slide? No, this is like a whole different PowerPoint. They had me make 2 PowerPoints. I don't do PowerPoints well, but okay, this is the right one. So this whole talk is about our brain and how little we know about it, and you'll notice that after the word brain, there's an S because we really have more than one brain in our body. So the brain in our head that everyone knows about sends signals to our gut, and this brain in our head is tremendously affected by the food we eat, and wrong foods cause serious brain inflammation, and they cause gut inflammation too. And what happens ultimately with the foods that we're eating is we get kind of a brownout in our brain. It just stops firing properly, and then we get diseases like things that we call dementia and autism, and actually, autism is brain inflammation and the region of the brain. The kids are getting vaccinated, and they're not strong enough. They're not healthy enough to be vaccinated. They don't have an immune system. And so when they go in for the vaccinations, instead of being vaccinated, they become infected. And then the virus goes right into the brain, and then it causes damage, particularly in this region of the brain called the Broca region. So they lose their ability to speak and communicate to the outside world. And so I know that ultimately to cure many of these children, we're going to actually have to work specifically on the brain. And I think ultimately stem cells are going to be needed for many of them to recover them. And we do send children to Costa Rica for stem cells, and it looks like a really promising treatment for them. Now, but anyway, so inflammation is the brain is often inflamed, and when you have disorders like dementia and Alzheimer's, there's always inflammation there. Then also, when your brain starts to fail, you lose energy throughout your entire body, and we actually start dying. Now, there's the brain in our head, and then we have what's called the peripheral nervous system, which is all the nerves in the body, and ganglia, and so on. But then there's also another thing that we call sometimes the second brain, or the gut brain, or it's mostly scientifically called the enteric nervous system. And then we also have receptor sites on cells everywhere for brain chemicals and for the chemicals that are made in the gut. Like serotonin is a brain chemical made in the gut, and all throughout the entire body, the cells have receptor sites for these brain chemicals. So they're kind of inappropriately named. They're not just brain chemicals. They go through the whole entire body. Now, the brain in our gut is called the enteric nervous system, or the second brain. And if you sever, the 2 brains are connected by the vagus cord. If you sever the connection between the 2 brains, the brain in the gut continues to work independently. It continues to do everything it's supposed to do, like digest foods and so on, make neurotransmitters. The brain in our head, though, starts to suffer tremendously. So in many ways, this abdominal brain is really a primal brain. And so there's something else controlling the enteric nervous system or the second brain that I want to get to that almost nobody knows about. So that's where I'm leading to that, and it's more exciting. Now, many of us sitting here are actually brain damaged. When we fall out of a tree or we have a car accident, we even damage our spine or have a neck injury or something like that, it damages our brains. And the brain is really good at learning to compensate. So if you have injury on the right side of your head with short-term memory, we start to compensate. So a lot of times we don't notice that we have brain injury. But I think with the stem cells, which are going to be one of the most promising ways to fix the brain, we're going to find that many of us will do really, really well to get these cells that go into the brain and begin to repair the brain, and it's going to become a really important treatment for a lot of the baby boomers. So here's ways the brain can be damaged. You can have a physical injury like an accident. You can have a stroke. You can have lack of oxygen to the brain. Poor nutrition, stress tremendously damages the brain. Infections in the brain are a huge problem. Stimulants like caffeine damage the brain. Drugs damage the brain, whether they're medicinal or recreational drugs. They all damage the brain. Poor sleep, not getting enough sleep, damages the brain. Vitamin D deficiency, the brain definitely needs vitamin D. Dehydration is a big problem as we get older. The body naturally becomes more dehydrated. The brain is one of the organs that becomes most dehydrated, and the brain is one of the organs that needs the most water in the body. If we overeat, that damages the brain. And chemicals and additives, of course, like heavy metals and mercury and so on, damage the brain. Now, if you're going to heal a damaged brain, you have to start by healing the gut. And this is something that we have proven and gotten a lot of the medical community to understand, is that they were looking at these children with autism and they weren't getting better. And speech therapy, no therapies worked for them until we started to heal the gut. And then they'd sit down for speech therapy and start learning how to speak. So they now know that when you want to heal the brain, you have to heal the gut. And so where do you begin? You actually nourish the gut, and then you actually feed the brain. The brain needs certain foods to be able to function properly. Now, there's a tremendous connection between the adrenals, which are these little walnut-sized organs sitting on top of the kidneys, and the brain. And so if your adrenals get weak, you will definitely lose brain power. And that's a serious problem. And you can tell that even young people, when they get stressed out, they can't think very well. They can't remember phone numbers that they normally know, or just the brain, the adrenals and the brain are intimately connected with each other. And so the adrenals are damaged by stress, by too much sugar, by poor nutrition. And the adrenals need, in order to be healthy, they need huge amounts of minerals. They need B vitamins, vitamin C, and they actually need protein, particularly collagen. If you've ever cooked a chicken or turkey or something and picked it up and there's this jelly-like stuff there, that's collagen, and it's excellent for the adrenals. Now, DHEA is the most abundant hormone in the body, and the brain uses more DHEA than anywhere else in the entire body. And so when the adrenals get weak, they don't produce DHEA, and then that's another reason why the brain starts to suffer. Now, here's what sugar does to your brain. Initially, the brain is thrilled when you eat a piece of sugar. You just feel so high and excited. When we have sugar in our body, over 50% of it goes immediately into the brain. Now, it's damaging the brain, but it goes there. And you feel great short term, and the reason for that is because sugar increases dopamine. There's a little tiny region in the brain called the nucleus accumbens, and that region is one of the regions where dopamine is produced. Dopamine is a neurotransmitter or a brain chemical that makes us feel really excited. Like if somebody said right now that you just won a little red Mercedes, you would say, oh my God, this is incredible, and you just want to hurry up and get to the dealership, and on the way to the dealership, you'd be so excited about getting your little red Mercedes, and that's a dopamine rush. That's why men sit there and yell and scream at referees during ball games. Their dopamine's up really high, and they feel great. So when you eat sugar, when you drink coffee and have caffeine, tobacco does it, all kinds of drugs do it, heroin and everything. All of those things equally raise dopamine. So it doesn't matter if you're getting sugar or if you're doing heroin, they all increase dopamine, and you always feel better. So what happens is there's a crash afterwards. The high only lasts for so long, and then there's a crash. And so what you naturally want to do is feel good like that again. And so the next thing you know, you're back for another little piece of sugar or another cigarette or another glass of wine or alcohol or more heroin. And so pretty soon you're addicted. This is the fastest track to getting addicted, is because of this little nucleus accumbens region in the brain. Now, the problem is that sugar literally rots the brain. And so over time, the more sugar or drugs or whatever you use, the more you're beginning to lose your brain power. So the question is, can we afford to lose an organ that literally monitors and regulates every single cell in the body? Are you willing to give up your brain? Now, there's something called brain-derived neurotropic factors, and they are responsible for the development of new brain tissue in your brain. The brain is always growing new tissue, new cells. And brain-derived neurotropic factor is one of the things that allows our brains to get new cells. And actually, a healthy brain will continue to grow new cells all our life long. We don't have to get Alzheimer's, for example. And if you don't have brain-derived neurotropic factor, then you start to have things like depression and Alzheimer's, and there's even obsessive-compulsive disorder. If you've got low BDNF, it's called, then you'll have depression, obsessive-compulsive disorder, and lots of other brain problems start to happen. Now, there are insulin receptors in our brain. There's insulin receptors in every cell in the body and for energy. And so there are insulin receptors in the brain. And these insulin receptors are actually sitting on the surface of the brain cells. And too much sugar causes these receptors to shut down, so your brain literally goes into a burnout. And some of the receptors actually get sucked into the cell. And then when that happens, you get trash or buildup of garbage. They're not supposed to be there inside the cell. And that's leads to eventually things like Alzheimer's. So, but the bottom line is sugar is really a serious poison for our brain. And the good thing that we really should have a no sugar diet ideally, or maybe a very, very low sugar diet. But one of the great things about the body ecology diet, it literally is a zero sugar diet if it's done properly. And the other good thing about it is that if you eat the fermented foods, you actually have no desire for sugar. So it's one thing to say to somebody, don't eat sugar, it's not good for you, but they love it, and it tastes good, and they want that dopamine high. So if you can take away a person's desire for sugar altogether, then you've got a chance of getting them off of sugar. They don't want it anymore. It's like a cookie looks like a piece of cardboard, and they really don't want it. And I know this is true because when we start working with autistic children, most all of them only eat carbohydrates. And their parents say, how is it possible that I could ever get him to eat a vegetable? He will not eat broccoli. And we just say, well, just start on the coconut kefir. The next thing you know, they're crawling up in their parents' lap and grabbing the broccoli off the plate. So you don't have to worry about how it's going to happen. It just naturally happens. And so that would happen for all of us too. If you feel like, I know I shouldn't be eating sugar, I eat too much sugar, I don't know how to stop eating it, this is where you start. You start with eating fermented foods. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, but one of the most serious problems in the completely vegan community But even in the community of people eating large amounts of animal protein is actually protein malnourishment. And vegans, of course, are at risk, but it's really a problem for everybody. And there are 8 essential amino acids that we have to have. They say, we need 8 essential amino acids, but actually, all the other, in my opinion, all the amino acid, all 22 of them are actually essential, and we're usually deficient in those as well. There's something called branch chain amino acids that you can get from whey protein. So if you're eating whey protein, whey protein is actually a food that's very good for the brain. Now, I want to talk a little bit about some of the brain chemicals. Serotonin is probably the most well-known brain chemical. And serotonin is really special. When you don't have enough of it, you're constipated. If you have too much of it, you'll be constipated. And so people that are on what's called serotonin reuptake inhibitors, they're the drugs for depression, those drugs never work. And soon the person, they don't even help them overcome their depression because they're really not going to the source of the problem. There's a deficiency in serotonin, and they're not creating more serotonin. What they're doing is keeping the little bit of serotonin you're making out in the bloodstream. They're not making more serotonin, so soon they start to fail. But also serotonin is very critical for growing new brain cells. This is the very latest thing that was just discovered probably maybe 2 months ago, is they also now know that serotonin is critical for growing brain cells in the gut brain. So it's a really important neurotransmitter, and it's damage. I mean, we lose our serotonin when we eat sugar. We lose our serotonin when we eat a lot of caffeine. Now, GABA, the other brain chemical that's so important, is the one that when we're deficient in it, we are very high-strung, full of anxiety. A lot of times if you're feeling anxious and you just go take 500, 600, 700, 1,000 milligrams of GABA, you'll notice in about 10, 15, 20 minutes how calm you feel. I think a lot of people you should always have GABA on hand. And if you're having trouble going to bed at night, just take a GABA capsule. And notice how much calmer and better you're sleeping. There are literally receptor sites all over the whole body and in the brain for GABA. And then dopamine is the one I just talked about, the one that makes you feel really high. All of those all 3 of those the body stops producing serotonin, GABA, and dopamine when it gets too much caffeine and too much sugar. Now, how do you get these? How do they get made in our body? They're all formed from amino acids. So if you aren't making enough, if you're not digesting proteins and you're not eating proteins, then you're going to become deficient in your brain chemicals. And so you have to really ask yourself, am I eating and digesting protein enough? The other thing that's important to know is that it isn't just making them. We have to have the receptor sites on the cell that receive these neurotransmitters dock onto the cell, and those are called receptor sites. And so the receptor sites have to be sensitive to these neurotransmitters. And they get dumbed down. The receptor sites close up and get dumbed down with chemicals, heavy metals, drugs, alcohol, stimulants like sugar and caffeine. So 2 things are happening. You're losing your neurotransmitters, your brain chemicals, and you're dulling down the receptor sites for them anyway. 90%. Okay, so the 2 brains are constantly talking to each other. I mean, they're in constant communication. They're really one. The truth of the matter is we have one big brain in our body. And all these massive these cells in our gut are communicating with the one in our brain. 90% of the communication is really the gut talking to the brain. And only 10% of the communication is really from the brain going to the gut. So the gut is quite a chatterbox, really. And now, here's what I really want to get into, because this is kind of a special piece of information that this is all science. You can find this information in books and on the internet and everything, but now the information I'm coming to is not known by anybody practically. So there are magical alchemists that are supposed to be living inside our gut that literally are having a profound effect on our gut. And that's where the fermented foods are so important, and the microflora are important because they literally communicate to the gut wall. They listen and they hear. There's a new subset of microbiologists who study something called quorum sensing. And that's, I always used to say years ago, someday we will have microbiologists who are sociologists and study how the microflora communicate with each other. Well, it's here. About maybe less than 5 years ago, this new branch of science came about, and they are constantly focusing on how the microflora relate to each other, which ones support each other. Like some of the microflora actually secrete a chemical so another little one will live beside it because they work well together. And they really are highly intelligent, and most people have no idea that they even exist. And for many people, they don't exist. Their gut is completely deficient of these beneficial microflora. So the microflora actually talk to the gut wall, they listen and hear. And I always like to say, I like to use the word alchemists, because an alchemist is somebody who can take something that isn't even there and manifest something, take nothing and make something out of it. Well, the microflora can actually take, let's say you're deficient in calcium, they'll go get some other element like silica or magnesium and they'll make calcium for you. So they really are alchemists. They're magical little beings that we can't see, by the way. And it's a good thing we can't see the microflora and so our eyes were created so we couldn't see them, because if we could see them, that's all we would see. We couldn't see that we're all wearing different colors. We couldn't even see each other's facial, different eyes or noses or anything. All we would just see is these shapes of bacteria because we're completely covered in microorganisms. Everything is. The floor, the walls, the chairs we're sitting on, everything is covered in microflora. And so fortunately we can't see them. And anyway, so right now probiotics are really hot. They're called the new superstars in the natural food world. And the study of the brain is a really hot field of study, which is good. People aren't linking the two together at all, though. And I'm kind of amazed, actually, that the scientists are not looking. Now, just recently, some of the companies that produce probiotic strains, like a company up in Canada, held this gigantic forum, and all the top scientists in the world that are doing research came together in different fields. Some were gastroenterologists, some were psychologists, some were animal scientists, like in the, strangely enough, like in veterinarian medicine, they actually know a lot more about health and nutrition than we do. So they've been doing a lot of study on gut microflora in animals because they realize that they're critical in even animals too. I mean, everything has an inner ecosystem. Even flies and fish have this bacteria living in their guts. And so obviously they have discovered in veterinary medicine that they're really important. Well, fortunately in this recent symposium, this conference that they gathered all these brilliant minds together, they began to share what they're learning. And they're beginning to see a couple of interesting things. One thing is that they took a bunch of pigs, and the pigs at times get stressed out. So they fed one group of pigs bacteria, one called Saccharomyces boulardii, and the other group didn't get any Saccharomyces boulardii. And then they gave it to them for 3 weeks, and then they subjected them to a lot of stress. Well, the ones that were on the Saccharomyces boulardii handled the stress just fine, but the other pigs got really stressed out. So that was, believe it or not, an exciting finding, because they realized that one particular strain of microflora, a yeast, actually specifically was useful in helping us control stress. Now, all of us are under stress all the time. Even if everything's good in our life and we have plenty of money and all, we just live in a world where you turn on TV and you don't know, if we're going to even make it 3 months from now. It looks like the world's falling apart. So we're going through a stressful time in many, many ways, and so we really need these microflora. Saccharomyces boulardii is in our probiotic liquids. It does a lot of other great things too, but there's now science that shows, and that's important to the doctors, there's now science that shows that if you take Saccharomyces boulardii, you handle stress better. Now, the microflora are found in fermented foods. And fermented foods have been around on this planet for a long time. This civilization that we live in right now is said to be about 6,000 years old. And when I started researching foods, fermented foods, a long time ago, it was hard to find much information. But it was interesting because I brought milk kefir into the country. We had only a drinkable yogurt. We had yogurt, but nobody even really knew what real kefir was. And so I was trying to find out everything I could about it. And it came originally from Turkey. And in Turkey, what they say is that kefir was given to them by the gods. And so they were told that they could never share the kefir, the secret of kefir, with anybody else because somebody might change it. And they were told by the gods to never change it in any way. Kefir has a very special, this is milk kefir, it has a very special symbiotic relationship between those particular microflora. And so they didn't share it for a long time, except that the Russians were very, very jealous of the Turkish people because they had this food that always made them feel good. Kefir in Turkish means feel good. So this is really a true story. The prince, the Turkish prince, was quite a ladies' man. And so they sent a beautiful Russian woman over to Turkey, and he fell in love with her as planned. And then she said that she would marry him if he gave her country the secret to making kefir. Well, he couldn't, and he wouldn't, so she left. But he missed her so much that he sent a convoy of people to kidnap her and bring her back. And then huge uproar occurred between this gigantic country of Russia and this teeny little country called Turkey. So the king gave the kefir to the Russians, and now they are the #1 consumers of kefir in the world. They give it to their children at 4 months diluted, and every child in Russia always receives a glass of kefir when they go to school in the morning because they know it builds their immune system and makes them really strong. They say when children drink kefir, they don't get sick. And the reason for that is because one of the things that the microflora do is they colonize in your intestines, and then one of their most important jobs is they're responsible for your immune system. 75 to 80% of your immune system is determined by the microflora in your gut. So if you don't have any, or if you have pathogenic bacteria living in your gut, you don't have an immune system. Now, cultured vegetables are they were the first food that I started teaching people about years ago. And if you want to make cultured vegetables, you don't need to use any starter because the plants that come out of the garden, unless they're sprayed with chemicals, have a lot of beneficial bacteria on them. And when you bring them in the house and you start shredding them up, if you pack them tightly into a jar, the microflora on there will start eating up the sugar in the vegetables and will ferment those vegetables. But if you do it our way, see, years ago, I was doing strange things that people didn't like I was smuggling in stevia powder and selling it. And I was having trouble. I brought coconut oil back to this guy. Everybody thought it was terrible for you. It was raised your cholesterol levels. So I got some, and I started selling it, and I remember it was funny because this Center for Disease Control, Center for Science in the Public Interest, Michael Jacobson's group, they called me one day and they said, "You have a great website for stevia.net. That's a website we had. Can we mention it in our newsletter?" And I said, "Yeah, but would you also like to talk about coconut oil?" They hung up on me and they never called back, and they wouldn't say anything about stevia. Because there's been a long ongoing fight between Sally Fallon and Mary Enig, and which is Weston A. Price, and Michael Jacobson, who, by the way, is heavily involved with Monsanto. So the whole thing was really interesting. And so here I am bringing out these fermented foods, and I didn't want them to shut down everything because they said that some little girl in Kansas City died because she ate some cultured vegetables. And so I really looked to see how I could make these, and also with milk, kefir too. I started off making kefir with kefir grains. And as a matter of fact, how that all came about was kind of a miracle because I knew about kefir and I wanted to find out about it, but I called Beatrice Trumhunter and she said, oh, I used to make kefir, but I went on a trip and my kefir died and I never made it again. I called Cornell University and they said, no, we don't know anything about kefir, but we can tell you a lot about cheese. We do a lot of cheese making up here, and nobody knew anything. And so one day I had to go to Japan for actually a spiritual ceremony up in the mountains. And the weirdest thing is that somebody I knew who lived about 10 hours away by car drove also to the ceremony, and he brought 2 friends with him. And we're talking and catching up on what our families are doing and everything, and because he spoke English. And then this little couple sits there, and they don't say anything because they only speak Japanese. And so finally he says to me, well, my friend came on this trip because she has something to give you. And I said, really? That's pretty amazing. And so she opens this little purse, and in the purse was a little jar of milk with kefir grains in it. And she also had a little container of milk and a strainer. And so she got a glass, and she strained the kefir grains. And I've been traveling like 2 days to get there. She made me this little glass of kefir, and I drank it. And I noticed how strong it made me feel. So, and then she put more milk into the little jar and gave it to me. And I carried it home 3 days later and smuggled it through customs, and it made it over here. So I started taking milk, especially goat's milk, because I want to talk about dairy in a minute. And I started making milk, this kefir, and then the grains grew. Soon there's a lot of them, so I was giving them away to people. And I started learning a lot of things. For one thing, sometimes they would be bubbly, and then at other times they'd go flat. And eventually what I learned was that the yeast, as soon as it goes flat like that, the yeast are gone. At that particular time, 5 people showed up in my life that all had cancer. And what I did was I put them on a raw, fermented food diet, and the one real protein they had was they drank this milk kefir, and all of them are alive today. They had really amazing recoveries. Kefir is, by the way, milk kefir is an excellent food to eat in the summer. It's cooling to the body. And a couple of the people had gone to different places, like one went to Hippocrates, one went to the Gerson Institute, and they came back really weak. So adding the kefir to what they were trying to do raw strengthened them tremendously. So I was getting a lot of, I was learning about kefir a lot back in those days. But anyway, what often sometimes would happen is they would just go bad. And you'd come in the kitchen and there'd be this glass jar with this strange looking, like pink stripe around the outside, or gray mold starting to grow on the top. And then Helios Nutrition came out with their line of kefir. And I've been helping them promote it. So I went to Seattle to talk at a bunch of health food stores there, and I was talking about kefir, and everywhere I went, people showed up with these big jars of kefir made with the grains. And so they'd come up and they'd say, are these okay to drink? And they'd just be disgusting. They smell disgusting and everything. So I'd say, no, don't eat that. But then it made me start to think, how can I make fermented foods, or teach people how to make fermented foods, and not have some little girl in Kansas City die, and then they'll stop everything I'm doing. So that's how I got into the starter cultures. I found a fabulous company over in Germany that made the cultures, or they're not made, they're bacteria, they just gave them to me. And so we started, the reason I like to put the cultured vegetable starter into the cultured vegetables is because it's a bacteria called Plantarum. And Plantarum is on vegetables. It's a bacteria that's on vegetables anyway. But if you inoculate your batch of fermented say your cabbage, with extra Plantarum, then when they start to grow and multiply, you end up with this jar of cultured vegetables that are way, way, way more potent. Then you can do things like you can feed them something, feed them a little honey, a little bit of, we have a product called Echo Bloom, which is food that they just love. It's really chicory inulin, and they love it. And if you put some minerals in there, they love that too. So you can make more potent batches by doing little things like that. Many, many people can't, so to me the grains weren't safe. There was a man on the website, his name was Dom, and he was in Australia, and he put something on the website for quite a while about how I was only selling these starters because I wanted to make a lot of money. But the real reason I did it was because I wanted to be sure people really had a safe product. And we know what's going into them. In other words, if you use the kefir starter to go into the milk or into the coconut kefir, you know you're getting true kefir bacteria and true kefir yeast. And they won't turn, because as people are transferring those grains and handing them around to their friends, it's very easy to contaminate them. And that's what was happening, particularly in Seattle. So we have a line of probiotic liquids that are made for us over in Australia. Again, the plants are extremely hardy over there, and we isolate the bacteria off of those plants and then make these probiotic liquids. They do have Saccharomyces boulardii in them, which is a phenomenal yeast to put in your gut, and they're very rich in acidophilus, which is a bacteria that lives and grows mostly in the small intestine. Now, I'm perfectly happy for people to go out and buy other bacteria, probiotics that maybe have bifidus in them, because our bacteria doesn't have bifidus, and bifidus is a predominant bacteria that lives in the large intestine. Oddly enough, though, for some reason, when you start eating these foods, these ones, it's like the whole inner ecosystem starts to form itself on its own. You don't even really have to put the bifidus in there. They just come somehow. So maybe there's some on the vegetables or, in small amounts, but they're supposed to grow, and they do. It's like a magical world in there that they don't really understand yet. I always call it the real new, like we're trying to explore space, and I'm always saying, let's explore this inner world, because it's a fascinating world to know much more about. So we also have young coconut kefir. A lot of people can't do dairy. If you turn on TV and you hear about a fermented food, everybody immediately thinks yogurt. But a whole bunch of people can't do dairy. And so I got the idea to start fermenting coconut water, and it turned out to be a really phenomenal thing to ferment. Now, the coconut water that ferments best comes from Thailand, because it's much sweeter. The coconuts in Thailand are the sweetest coconuts in the world. Some places like Jamaica, there's no sugar in the coconut water, so you can't even ferment it. But the Thai coconuts are excellent for fermenting. We have Thai coconut water that we bring in from Thailand, and they're organic. They're certified organic. They're taken really excellent care of, and as soon as the water comes out or the meat comes out of the coconut, it's immediately frozen, so it's very fresh. And you can, the first 200 people that go outside, there's bottles of it waiting out there for you to try. But it was a difficult thing to get this to happen. But for so many years, people have said to me, it's so hard to get the water out of the coconuts, or some people can't even get coconuts. So we finally got this arrangement made with the people in Thailand so that we can bring in this really high quality coconut water and coconut meat to make it easier for people. Ultimately, I'm hoping that people will go into the business and make the coconut kefir for us, but it probably will always be sort of a local cottage product, because it doesn't have a long shelf life, and it doesn't ship, and you can't freeze it. Once you make the coconut kefir, you can't freeze it, or you'll kill all the bacteria. So it has it has about a 10-day shelf life, and then what starts happening is there's no sugar in the water any longer, so the microflora start to die. They don't have enough food to live off of. So you start to lose the microflora. So your best coconut kefir is the fresh, like when it's made fresh every other day. And it's a very powerful food. It's rich in sulfurated proteins, so it cleanses the liver and the kidney and the heart. It's got a lot of potassium in it, and it just, so many things. Like, you can tell the effect it's having on the liver, because women that have gone into menopause before they're supposed to, their periods come back. Women report that their periods are extremely clean, and the blood is very clear. People with joint problems, their joint problems clear up, skin problems clear up. So those are all things that the liver controls. And vision. Even myself, I wear contact lenses. 4 times I've had to go back to the eye doctor because I couldn't see out of them. And all the time, each time, she made my lenses very weak, weaker and weaker. Today they're really weak because of I'm sure it's the coconut kefir. So that it has a profound effect on even reversing eye problems, but you can imagine in preventing them too. Macular degeneration and problems like that are very common as people get older, so I think this is going to be proved to be a really great for that, for eye problems. Now inside the coconut is that wonderful soft spoon meat. It has a little bit of sugar in it, and so it's good to ferment, but you don't need to ferment it very long, just about 8 hours. If you ferment it too long, it just gets it's too sour and it doesn't taste as good. At 8 hours, it tastes delicious and you can make it into puddings. It's one of the most popular desserts that we give our autistic children. They'll do things like blend it up with pineapple and put stevia in it. Other mothers do all kinds of amazing things with it, but it is a delicious dessert, and it is a raw, fermented, vegan protein. It's really good for you. It's great for breakfast. It's great to put in a green smoothie in the morning. So we have, just in the state of California now, do we have this coconut water and coconut meat. Most people don't know we have it because it's, in the frozen section, and there's 50 billion other products in the frozen section, so people don't know we have it. But if you live in California, you don't have to crack open coconuts. And also the coconuts that we're getting in this country from Thailand are sprayed and even are soaked in formaldehyde because they're trying to kill anything that's on it. The coconut water is protected pretty well inside that white shell, but when you open it up and you pour the water out, you can contaminate the water. So the way we're doing it to bring it in organic and freezing it like that is really the best way to do it so far. And if you live in Florida or some other state that has coconuts, the Florida coconuts don't have very much sugar in them. They have enough sugar to ferment them, but the finished product isn't as delicious and sweet as the Thai coconut kefir. The what? Hawaii? I don't know about Hawaii yet. I have to find out. I don't know. I just know that one thing I do know is there's no other coconut in the world that's as sweet as the Thai coconuts. So I know the Thai is the best, but I don't know. I just know in Jamaica, I tried 3 or 4 times and it wouldn't ferment. So then I tasted the water and I thought, there's no sugar in this. And they have to have some sugar. I even tried adding sugar and that didn't work. For some reason, they don't like Jamaican coconuts. But anyway, so what does your brain need? Oops, good thing they taught me how to do the back button. Okay, so here's what your brain needs to be healthy. It has to have water. But here's what happens. A baby's body is about 80% water. As we get older, our body becomes more and more dehydrated. And so maybe we have 70%, but that's a huge difference in the body if we get that dehydrated. And then every decade we get more dehydrated, which is why old people look so shriveled up, because they're really, really dehydrated. Well, you will eventually get to the point where it's impossible to correct the dehydration in the body in an elderly person. It can't be corrected. And except for very recently, they just discovered that if you restore growth hormone levels to their optimum levels, you can rehydrate the body again. So this is actually an important thing to know. So water's important. And water with minerals is especially good for the brain. The right kind of fats are important. Everybody knows about DHA and EPA and how good that is for the brain, but what most people don't realize is how important butter fat is, milk fat, which we know is butter or ghee. And one of the reasons, when I first started working with autistic children, there are certain things I learned about them from my files and from, studying certain patterns. One thing I noticed is most of them were blood type A. It's rare to find an O or a B, especially rare to find a B. Sometimes you find O's, but almost all of them are blood type A. The other thing, they don't handle dairy at all. They are never breastfed. Rarely, I should say. I have found about 2 that are in hundreds that I've worked with. Maybe 2 or 3 have been breastfed. And most all of them were soy-fed, soy milk. So soy suppresses the thyroid, and when that happens, it suppresses the adrenals, so that takes away even more of their energy. They don't have this inner ecosystem of this good bacteria in their gut, so they don't digest foods, and they don't have an immune system. Well, since they were soy formula fed, and I knew they didn't get a lot of good healthy breast milk, which should be very rich in fat. It isn't necessarily rich in fat unless the mother's eating well, but breast milk is supposed to be very rich in fat. Actually, 50% of the energy in breast milk comes from the fat. And that fat actually comes down in the last few minutes of the baby breastfeeding and sucking. The fat's not there at first, and then all of a sudden it comes down, and the baby gets this nice little shot of fat, and then they're all happy and contented, and they quit nursing. So knowing this, I thought, gosh, these kids need this milk fat. And so I started introducing raw butter and ghee into the autism community. Some of the mothers were, as always, totally did anything I said. And some of them, of course, questioned it, challenged me, particularly ones that were married to doctors. And, but, you know, time proves out that it worked. And then every once in a while, a mother would say, well, my son can't take the butter, like bad butter. Like, this butter's bad. And so after a little while longer, I got him to realize it's not the butter's fault. Butter's just being butter. But if you can't eat the butter, it's because your liver and gallbladder are really the problem. So we do this a lot. We blame the food and we avoid certain foods when the food isn't really the problem. It's something else. In this particular case, if you have butter, have trouble with fats, you need to work on your liver and gallbladder. So, and the great thing is that so many of the kids could take this coconut kefir that after a few more weeks in the coconut kefir, cleaning their liver and everything, then they could start to eat the fat. But the reason they needed it is because this kind of milk fat is critical for the developing brain. And the fat actually also is critical for driving in the minerals that are in the milk, like the calcium and the phosphorus. You need the fat to drive in the minerals so that the baby is going to have healthy bones and teeth. But the baby's brain is developing tremendously. One of the reasons that we're born around 9 months is because we can't grow in the womb any longer. Like, it's too crowded in there, and the brain is about to go through a tremendous 2-year growth sprout. So we can't stay in the womb another 2 years, although it would be nice if we could, because we would be more developed and cuter we'd be much cuter when we came out, much smarter when we came out. But we come out, and actually, the human baby is actually extremely underdeveloped when it's born. But over the next 2 years, tremendous amount of brain development happens. A lot has been happening in the womb, and so the mother during pregnancy needs to be eating these good fats, but especially, and then even after birth, a lot of our brain development occurs in the first 2 years after birth. But it never stops growing. The brain never stops growing, replacing cells and, keeping itself healthy if we feed it right. So the other thing besides fats, the other thing that the brain needs a lot of is protein. And again, I've talked about this even last time a lot. Protein malnourishment is a serious problem for everybody. And I once saw some scans of the brains, and they were what's called real-time EEG. So the people were wired up, and so you could see their brains in real time. Well, the ones that didn't have any breakfast, their brain waves were just kind of like this, just kind of flat. And then they were given protein, and then their brain waves, like right away, started being all happy and up and down like they're supposed to be, and the person came alive. So protein is extremely important for the brain. Minerals are important, and vitamins are important. So basically, all the nutrients are necessary for the brain, and DHEA. So please, after you get home and you start thinking about all the things you learned here, next time you eat, ask yourself, am I getting enough protein, and am I digesting the protein I'm eating? I just took away my PowerPoint. Oh, there it comes. Okay. Now, everybody knows that the brain needs sugar. You hear that all the time, right? Well, what it means is the brain needs glucose. But glucose and sugar aren't necessarily the same thing. When we eat food, the ultimate breakdown of all food is glucose. Eventually, all food breaks down into glucose, and the combination of this glucose and oxygen fuel the little tiny cells. Inside of every cell are these lots of little mitochondria. They're little energy factories that produce energy, so that without them, the cell dies and nothing happens. You have to have the mitochondria producing energy. Well, the mitochondria need oxygen and glucose, but it doesn't mean sugar. It means that you need to eat food, healthy food, properly broken down, reaching the brain like it's supposed to, and then the brain has energy. And water is critical too. The brain suffers immediately when we become dehydrated. It's really interesting because with the autistic children, a lot of times they are constantly like trying to get food. And the reason for that is because because of the injury in their brain and so on, and especially the way their gut is, they aren't really metabolizing food, and the glucose isn't getting into the brain. So they start to, they become aware that they're literally starting to fall apart. It's kind of like what happens when you have hypoglycemia. You get real spacey. That's what's happening to them. So they rush and get anything they can, or they're kind of a wreck until they get some food in them. But that's because the brain is really desperately needing glucose. And water is like that too. It's a good, you really do need to eat at least drink a half a gallon of water a day, and it really should have minerals in it. I'm glad there was a lot of focus on minerals, because they're, for many years I used to say, is there one nutrient that's more important than others? Like, we've got amino acids and fatty acids, and one day I figured it out. And the way I figured it out was, the answer is all of them are essential. We have to have minerals, we have to have fatty acids, we have to have amino acids and so on, but vitamins. But there's one nutrient that we need more of, and that's minerals. And the way I figured it out, one of the most important clues I got, was that amino acids have to be, proteins are broken down to amino acids, fats are broken down to fatty acids, minerals aren't broken down. Minerals are in the food, and they're there, immediately accessible. And the other thing is that there are more absorption sites in the gut for minerals than for any other nutrient. So we need more minerals than anything else, but they're all essential. So good fats are important, and here's some of the best fats for the brain. Egg yolks, well, I mentioned more omega-3s like DHA and EPA. You can even get eggs with DHA in them now. But really, the problem with all the eggs in the store, those chickens are fed soy, and soy is not a natural food for a chicken. Chickens should be running around and getting worms and bugs and so on, and the eggs are completely different and much healthier if they're allowed to get their own natural protein source, which is bugs. But so if you can get eggs from a real farmer that has real chickens, that makes a difference too. And the yolks are totally different. It's the yolk of the egg that's the brain food. We usually encourage people to take one whole egg and 2 yolks and scramble it. And that's a very good, then cook it in ghee or butter, and don't overcook it. Cook it so it's very soft. Take it off before it's finished cooking, and kind of cook it, take the pan off the heat and stir it around 1 or 2 more times, and immediately put it into the bowl. There's so much heat in the eggs at that point that you can just stir them around a couple more times and they're finished cooking. And they're very softly cooked this way, and they're not overcooked, so you can digest them. But egg yolks are excellent for you, not the white that everybody thinks is so good for them. Salmon is excellent, the oil in salmon and fish oils. Raw butter and ghee is great for the brain, coconut oil, olive oil. And however, too many animal fats, especially cooked animal fat, is devastating for the brain. All the bad fats that we've had in this country, like the canola oil and the vegetable oils, have been devastating our brain and our endocrine system too, ruining our liver. I guess if I could, as much as I know that sugar is a poison, if I could choose one thing to change about the world we live in, I would take out all the bad fats, and there'd be a huge improvement in people's health immediately. So, same for the brain. Now, we have a product called Ancient Earth Minerals, and they're very antiviral. They're actually antifungal. They're just really good to be taking in your body for that reason, too, but they nourish both the brain and the adrenals. So be sure you take in minerals from every single source you can. There's a lot of people that have minerals they're all good. So just take them all the time. So you have to increase the amount of protein, but you also have to digest the protein. And that's where using enzymes like hydrochloric acid is essential for digesting protein in the stomach. Pancreatin is essential for digesting protein in the small intestine. And you have to prepare the proteins right. They really are best. They're easier to digest when they're rare or raw. If you cook them completely done, you might as well be eating rubber bands. Now, there's a lot of protein in the grain-light seeds that we recommend on the diet, like quinoa, millet, buckwheat, and amaranth. They're excellent foods for the brain, and they're excellent for producing serotonin. So if you stop eating them because you're an animal food eater and you don't eat any grains, they're not really grains. They're really seeds that have properties of grains. They're rich in B vitamins. They have this amazing calming effect on the body. They're rich in magnesium. But when you eat them for your last meal of the day, you will always produce more serotonin. Serotonin turns into melatonin, and you'll sleep better. And then I mentioned how to prepare them, rare or raw. Oh, chicken, though. Chicken isn't good to eat raw. You're better off, one of the best ways to have chicken is to make a brine, like a salt water brine, and soak your chicken in the brine. It makes them more tender. And then cook them at a very low temperature, like 275, just until they're done. Actually, not even until they're done, until they're like very, very light pink. And then you take the chicken out, and it sits there, and in the next 10 minutes, it finishes cooking itself because there's so much heat in the chicken. But people cook chicken usually at 350 degrees until it's done because they've been told it's not safe. It's this low temperature cooking and brining it that makes it really easy to digest chicken. Whey proteins, as I mentioned before, whey protein, if you get a non-denatured whey protein, it is an excellent brain food. It's excellent for your muscles. It also increases glutathione, so we have our body detoxifies better. Now, one of the things a lot of people are doing in the raw community for their protein are nuts and seeds. There's problems with nuts and seeds. Everything has a front and a back, remember, a positive and negative side. Nuts and seeds are extremely acidic. They're difficult to digest. They should always be soaked, even perhaps soaked with a little salt in them. You could dehydrate them after that if you want. But, and you only can eat small amounts of them because they're extremely rich in oxalic acid. Now, oxalic acid is a poison that's found in many, many plants, carrots, quinoa, a lot of really healthy things have spinach, have oxalates in them. It's a poison. But the poison's in there to kill the insect, to make the food unattractive to insects so that eventually we don't lose all the spinach because the insects have eaten it all up, so they won't touch it. Well, oxalates, many people have oxalate issues. They eat oxalates and then bad things are happening, like they eventually get kidney stones or another condition that a lot of women, more women than ever, are getting, which is called vulvodynia, which is a terrible inflammation of the vagina and vulva area. And little children that eat it, they get, their ears get red and their faces get all red too. And it's a poison for the nervous system. It's actually poisoning their nervous system. A lot of other bad things happen. It affects the heart in a negative way. But the reason that the people that are having trouble digesting oxalates are people without good healthy bacteria in their gut, because bacteria are oxalate eaters. There will soon be a drug that's coming out. It shouldn't be a drug, but they're making it a drug so they can make a lot of money on it. It's a special bacteria called, what's its name? That's it, Oxalobacter formigenes. I can only remember the formigenes part. And so that bacteria is on plants, and if it's in your gut, it eats up all the oxalates, no problem. And then also plantarum, the bacteria that's in the cultured vegetables, is also rich, is a good oxalate eater. And another bacteria called Infantis, which you can buy if you buy the it's called Life Start by Natron. That's Infantis. Infantis is a very interesting little bacteria. I can't wait until they do more research on it, because when a baby's born, The infantis is the first bacteria that appears in our gut, and for the first 6 weeks of our life, it is the predominant bacteria. And obviously, it's there for some reason. I personally think that science will prove it to be a major cleansing bacteria, that it causes the baby to go to the bathroom and cleanse out all the stuff he's been drinking in the womb, so his little digestive tract is primed to begin to develop this inner ecosystem. I don't know if I have time to explain that, but the whole inner ecosystem is a fascinating story. But anyway, be careful with nuts and seeds because they may not be the ideal protein, after all, for you. Again, the principle of uniqueness, they may be great for you. But again, they should always be eaten in small amounts because they are acidic, and because they are hard to digest, and because they are rich in oxalates. Now, one thing I'd like to tell this community is a lot of people are using vegan protein powders like Sun Warrior and hemp seed and these blends. They need to be soaked before you drink them because they're rich in phytic acid. So many times I've told people, at night, put them in like a little blender shaker thing and put some water, or what I like to do is have people put a little bit of probiotic liquid in there as well. And then when you're sleeping at night, the microflora are breaking down that protein powder. And when you get up in the morning and add some more water to it or whatever and drink it, you'll digest it better. Constantly, people are drinking these protein powders, and they don't realize they're not digesting them at all. So, let's see. So fermented proteins are the best possible proteins. You need tiny little amounts to do way more than a steak or a piece of fish or anything. There's nothing like fermented protein because you're enhancing the nutrients hundreds of times. And for that reason, I finally brought out this potent proteins. And what we've done is we've taken 50% fermented spirulina, and then we've fermented quinoa, millet, biodynamic brown rice, chickpeas and soybeans, alfalfa seeds and flax seeds. And so it's so potent, a half a teaspoon is all you need. And what I do, I fortunately have had it for over a year because we first introduced it into Australia. And it's not one of these foods that you take it and it will increase your energy, but it's not like chocolate increases your energy or sugar does. But as you continue to use it, you'll just notice little things, like your brain works so much better and your muscles start to become more well-defined. So it's definitely important that we get protein. One of the most serious things that happens to people as they age is they become very protein malnourished. And this type of food will prevent that from happening. And that little jar looks like it's expensive, but it's 2 months worth. So if you're drawn to it, we don't have any more left, but we can ship it to you next week. Now, here's something really important is that the microflora in the gut are highly intelligent, and you can train them. You can actually teach them things. So, well, here's an example. Let's say that somebody has been a vegan for 3 years or something, and they decide they're going to eat eggs. You can't just suddenly jump into eating eggs without having a digestive problem, because the microflora in your gut don't know eggs. And so what you have to do, and this is the same with dairy, what you have to do is give them a small amount. Like with dairy, for example, you put a little bit, like maybe just a tablespoon or two, into some water and drink it. And do that for 4 or 5, 6 days, and then increase the amount. And little by little, the microflora will communicate among themselves, and they'll figure out exactly how to digest this new food you just told them to digest. But it takes them a little time to do that. So that happens sometimes. Somebody's been a vegan for a long time, and they want to maybe for some reason eat some protein, and they can't, and it hurts to eat it. They can't digest it, and they don't maybe have the stomach acid either. So just know that you can train your microflora to work for you. So the microflora stimulate, they cleanse, they feed, and they influence the function of both brains in the body. And they also, this is really important too, we have to reset. Like, we are so used to being stressed out. We are born literally into a world where from almost the minute we're born, especially baby boomers, they love life, they want it all. And so they push, 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 push. And so you reach a certain stage in your life where your adrenals are burned out. And you can't recharge somebody's adrenals ever unless you pull them out of that fight or flight mode that they're in. You have to literally calm them down before you can nourish them with Chinese herbs and so on. There's somebody here that makes a couple of really excellent foods for the brain that you all probably have seen the Mucuna on the table. One of the reasons I love this product is because it actually increases dopamine in a very safe, healthy way. So you'll feel happy and good without having an artificial way of getting it, like sugar. It's called Mucuna pruriens. And it's by Ultimate Superfoods, and they're right outside. They also have another product, another herb called Bacopa. Bacopa does something different. It wakes the mind up. It gets it functioning. We have found the children with autism on Bacopa are much more alert. It just makes the brain work better. So these are two wonderful products to take if you're concerned about your brain. Now when you want to reset your adrenals, like if you're trying to do all these things for your adrenals and you don't pull them out and calm them down, nothing's going to work for them. So first, take something like GABA and tryptophan, which is very calming, like maybe 2 tryptophan at bedtime and 2 GABA at bedtime for a week or so, and then you'll notice you sleep really deeply and you wake up during the day and you're feeling all happy and calm, even if stuff's happening all around you, you're not reacting to it. Then start nourishing your adrenals. Also start nourishing your adrenals with ashwagandha and all the wonderful Chinese herbs. Chinese medicine really understood the importance of taking care of the adrenals, although they always say the kidneys, but they also, I mean, they really were the adrenals that they're talking about. And Chinese medicine has great herbs for that. So there's somebody here that's got fabulous Chinese herbs that you should definitely see. I think colon therapy is extremely important for the brain because the brain, like every organ in our body, actually is constantly producing toxins. And they need to come out of our body. And so it all starts in the colon. When you start to clean the colon, then the lymph system gets cleaner, the liver gets cleaner. All the cells in the body are aware that toxins are beginning to leave, and so they all send their toxins out. And a lot of the children, a lot of people have heavy metals in their brain. And this, between taking the fermented foods and doing colon therapy, we find that the kids don't have high levels of heavy metals anymore. Yep, that would be good to know. A regular meal schedule is really important. That actually helps train your brain. And using enzymes and probiotic foods. And then I think it's a good idea, never let your intestines back up. The minute you do, you're starting to become really, really poisoned. And so even if you have to use some mild short-term colon stimulants, I don't like to use the word laxative because laxatives actually really harm the adrenals, but especially the Chinese herbs that help keep the colon, keeping everything moving in and out of your body is really, really important to do that for the health of the brain. Oops, that's it.
Thank you so
Last
much.
slide.
Donna Gates, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Amazing.